Hi, today I'm going to work on the Children's Corner pattern Tate. It's a sweet jacket that's for boys or girls. And actually, the main part I want to show you today is the part that kind of trips some people up, and that's putting the lining to the jacket. We'll go through the other steps. We'll go through those a little more quickly and then get to the part that you may maybe struggle with a little bit. So go ahead and get all your pieces together, your fabric, your notions, and we'll get started. So like I said, we're going to go through the first part of the instructions pretty quickly. It's pretty basic. You will be sewing your shoulder seams of your jacket fabric, your shoulder seams of your lining, and then you will put in your ease stitches on both your outer sleeve and your lining. And then you will set your sleeve into the lining and into the outer fabric for your jacket. So very basic. It's almost like you're making two jackets right now. Then if you haven't fused your interfacing on your collar, do that. It does make a difference. It helps to stabilize that collar and it will just look more crisp and finished. And then go ahead and put your collar together, clip it, turn it, press it, top stitch it, and then go ahead and baste it onto the neck edge of the jacket. Be sure that you've marked according to your fabric, according to your pattern, where you place your collar, and get that done, which is what I've done so far. So right now it looks like I have two jackets, and I'm making view A. So if you're making view B, obviously you won't have this short bodice, you'll have a longer full-length jacket. But get that done and we'll be ready for the next step, which will be 7. And actually we're going to combine, for the next segment, we'll combine step 7 and 8 together. Okay, I hope those first few steps went well for you. The next thing we're going to do is step 7, and that's pinning the edges of the sleeves together, the lining to the fabric, right sides together. Don't worry about the fact that the lining is shorter than the outer fabric, and the reason for that is once we get into constructing the top of the jacket, you'll see that the outer fabric of the sleeve will fold to the inside and just form a nice, clean, finished facing. So that sleeve will be stitched at the bottom. You'll do the same thing with the other sleeve. And then the next step is step 8, and that's where you take the front edge of your lining that looks like this, and you also stitch it to the front edge of the fabric, of the outer fabric of the jacket. So again, nothing else is going to match up. Your shoulder won't match with your shoulder over here, but it will eventually, because you've got a nice wide facing in the front, and that's because this is a double-breasted jacket. So you're going to have 4 seams to do before we come back again, both the bottoms of your sleeves and then the fronts of your jacket, just like it shows in the instructions. Now, if you're making view B, you're essentially going to be doing the same thing, except when you get to the bottom of your longer seam, if you're making the full-length coat, then you will need to stop 2 inches before you get to the very bottom. Those of you that are making view A, that's what we're going to do, but we'll do that at the bottom of that skirt section of the jacket. So we will be doing that, but just not right now. But if you are making view B, you'll stop the 2 inches before you get to the bottom edge of the jacket. So get that finished and we'll be back to keep moving on. Okay, I hope that step went well. Hopefully now you can see how the facing in the front will fold to the inside like this and make a nice finish, as well as the bottom of the sleeves. The hem will be turned up and will make a nice finish at the edge of the sleeves too. So now we are ready for step 9, and that is the neck edge. So I had pinned at my shoulders just so that I could be sure everything was matching up when I was pressing earlier. So now we just need to flip the jacket so it's right sides together. You've got your collar stitched on, and we're going to go back and match the shoulder seams at the neckline. And then as you pin along the neckline, you'll come to that folded line from the facing, still right sides together. And this will be a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I want you to stitch this seam, and then go back. You can trim a little bit if you would like, but mainly go back and clip, because this is a curve and it will lay much nicer if you clip it before you flip it and press it. So that's what we're going to do next. Make sure your shoulder seams are lined up. And you're going to stitch the neck edge from the fold at the facing all the way around. Okay, get that done. Get your seams clipped and pressed and turned right side out, and we'll be ready for the next step. Now that we've got the neckline done, we're ready for the underarm seam and the side seam of the bodice. So the way we do that is we start by putting right sides together. And I'm just matching, right now I'm matching the underarm seam of the lining, but then I'm just going to keep going and match where the lining meets the outer fabric at the bottom of the sleeve. And I'll go back and put a couple more pins there, and then you just keep going till you get to the underarm seam of the actual jacket fabric. And you'll put a pin there. And then of course at the very bottom. So this is one long seam, so it will include the sleeve and side seam of the jacket fabric, as well as the sleeve and the side seam of the bodice of the lining. And of course you'll do that on the other side too. After you do that, you'll turn these right side out, and I think for me it's easiest if I just reach my hand through the sleeve and pull it on through, and you'll be pulling the lining through too till you get back to where that folded edge of the bottom of the sleeve is. And you'll do that on both sides and press that seam, and then we'll be ready for the next step. Well, as you see, it's beginning to look more like a jacket all the time. We're ready for the skirt section of the View A jacket, and so we'll be working under View A skirt construction. And the first step is sewing the side seams of the outer fabric so that you have two seams. You have a side and a side seam or section, and then you have the back section, and those are sewn together just with a regular seam and pressed open. And then you do the very same with the lining. You'll have a center section for the lining and two shorter side sections. So you're going to sew those together. After you do that, then you will be sewing the lining to the outer fabric. So this is the top of the skirt, and you're going to sew until you get to 2 inches from the bottom. And be sure you stop at that 2-inch mark and go ahead and backstitch there. And you'll do the same thing on the other side. You'll sew till you get 2 inches from the bottom, stop, and backstitch. The next thing you'll do is you will trim 1/4 of an inch off of the lining fabric. So you can see now that my lining fabric is actually 1/4 of an inch shorter than the outer fabric. So once you do that, you'll press all of those seams open and then turn it right sides together like this. Actually, wrong sides together, excuse me. And once you have it wrong sides together, you're going to match seams again. You're going to match these side seams. And once again, your lining fabric is going to be shorter than your outer fabric, and that forms that same wide facing, just like at the top of the jacket. So once you've gotten that done and pressed that well, then you're going to go back and you're going to do 2 rows of gathering threads across the top. And to do that, because this is an 1/2 inch seam allowance, whereas every other seam on this jacket so far has been 1/4 of an inch, when you do your gathering threads, you can start and stop them right here. You don't have to put them all the way across, because this remains flat even when it's sewn onto your jacket. But go ahead and press that edge and then do 2 rows of gathering threads, one 3/8 of an inch from the top and one 5/8 of an inch from the top, and you'll be stitching in between those 2 gathering threads when we stitch it to the jacket. But first of all, get all of this done and get your gathering threads in, and then we'll be back to talk about actually stitching it to the bottom of the jacket. So I've got my skirt section sewn together, lining sewn to the outer fabric, my gathering threads in, and I am ready to start pinning the skirt to the bodice of this jacket. So start by just lifting up and holding the outer fabric. You need to leave the lining loose for now. It won't be sewn until later. It will be sewn down by hand. Once you do that, then you need to, and I have my center marked. Oh, now it's gone. Oh no. There it is. Okay, so I really did have a center marked, and I'm going to match it with the center back. And start pinning. Remember, this is a 1/2 inch seam, so after you get everything pinned in place and you're stitching, you'll be stitching with the skirt side up so that you can, for one thing, so you can be sure that you don't get any gathers caught the way you sometimes do if you can't see the gathers. You can stop and be sure that you don't get a little pucker or something. So you'll need to match, once you've matched that center back seam, then you'll match the side seams. It's hard to see the side seam in this corduroy. I can only see it in the lining fabric there. And then you also will want to match the folded edge of the facing on the skirt with the folded edge of the facing on the bodice. And put a pin right there, but remember, keep the rest of this facing loose. Just like we're keeping the lining loose, you keep the rest of this facing loose. So I'm going to keep pinning and adjusting my gathers. Then we'll get this sewn on. We'll talk about how to finish the seam up here. We're going to trim it to 1/4 of an inch, and then you'll be pressing under the lining of the bodice. I like to do it a scant 1/2 inch instead of a full 1/2 inch. That way I know I'm not going to get any pulling when I whip stitch this down to the top. And we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. Go ahead and get your skirt stitched on, and when you've got that done, come right back. I hope you've enjoyed this sew along. It's been a while since I've done a Tate, and they really are fun to do, and this is the time of year to get out these lightweight jackets. All that I have left to do is to whip down my lining. The hem looks so nice because the lining is just a little bit shorter than the outer fabric, so you don't have to worry about it showing below. and I've gotten my buttonholes. We have some new wooden buttons at the shop, so that's what I plan on putting on this Tate. See you later.